All right.
Hi, good morning.
Morning,
Good morning.
everybody.
Welcome back.
Table Talk Thursday.
Table Talk
Yeah.
Thursday.
Also, men's third Thursday. So
Yep.
big day.
Yes.
What's
What's
what are
going
they
on?
serving us?
It's lasagna tonight, I believe, with the fixins bread and whatnot.
Costco
So,
lasagna?
I believe so. I didn't ask, but
Well, I don't
Gary
think
could
I've
be
really ever met a lasagna I didn't like.
Gary could be in his kitchen right now cutting up sausage and vegetables, and
I'm down.
I don't know why you put vegetables in lasagna.
Yeah.
Scratch that.
What's wrong
I don't
with
know.
you, Brent?
Tomatoes. And
Not quite awake yet this
No.
morning? Is that?
Anyway, Thursday night, third Thursday. That's my announcement.
Yeah, it's usually fun.
Yeah.
It's good. It's
Yep.
good for guys to get out and get together again. So we've
And
had
it
what,
sounds
2
like
now?
Mr. Mike McCarter is going to share something that's on his heart tonight.
Yeah,
so-
I think we're gonna turn him loose on something,
yeah,
and it should be good.
yeah, that should be good.
Yeah,
Looking forward to it.
cool. So we all survived the changing of the guards. We didn't blow
We
up.
did.
Computers didn't stop working and reset.
I kind of just didn't really watch. I couldn't. I don't know why. I just couldn't do it. So, not that I just want to forget about it right now. Kind of.
Yeah.
It's more what I was thinking then. So, I tuned out. Just had a regular day. It was kind of nice.
Had a couple work meetings in the morning, so I didn't get watch the actual events themselves. We'll check headlines here and there, but
Yeah,
glad that it was an uneventful day.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You just didn't know how things were going to go. And
yeah, yeah. I didn't watch for anything either, but I was kind of like keeping my eye.
glad that nothing's on fire today.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Me too. Didn't burn anything down, so that's good. Maybe they can take the fences back down around the Capitol building and the White House. So the razor wire.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah, weird stuff. Weird times. How do you follow that? How do you follow?
I got more announcements.
Go for it.
Not table. This is table talk. I'm going to do this today. Apparently, town hall meeting is
Oh,
coming
yeah.
up on Friday the 29th.
Yeah.
Here at this location, 3R. But we both Lapine and 3R are going to join together. Just a chance to kind of catch up on what's going on in the church, how everybody's doing, get some reports from some of the ministry heads, and
And even questions, like anything
Yeah, and
that
ask
anyone's
questions.
interested about, like that's the place to do it.
yep. So
We'd be happy to answer them and hear
yeah,
them.
and cookies. So.
Cookies.
It's the best part.
So put that on your calendar, and I think we'll probably try to live stream it or at least record it. We usually do something like that, so people can tune in if they need to.
And that's a Friday night, right?
Friday night.
So you
But
can
don't
stay
let
up
that
late.
stop you from coming and being there in person.
Yeah, if you can come in person, it's always good to be together. And yeah, also Glenn Miller had asked us to pray. He's getting ready to leave to go to Liberia in the morning, and there's a lot. You can imagine trying to travel internationally right now has got its challenges. So he hasn't been able to go over there for quite some time, and he finally has an opportunity to get over there to do some training. So he's got to get through all the COVID stuff and then the travel stuff, and then starting Monday they've got a week long of training pastors and doing the things that he does over there. So
Sure.
so if we could pray for him, he would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be together. Yep. Cool. I'll just do that now, and then we'll.
Yeah, let's do it now.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Father, thank you for the chance we get to get together and do these things on Thursdays. We pray that today would be a blessing as we talk about the church, something that's dear to you and dear to us as well. And then we just want to remember to pray for Glenn right now as he gets ready to take off to go to Liberia and enjoy some ministry and some catching up with some people. And we just pray that everything works smoothly, comes together as far as the travel arrangements and the COVID stuff, and that it's fruitful time of ministry there. And so we commit him into your hands. Thank you that we have people that are willing to kind of go and do crazy things like this. And so we just ask that your Holy Spirit would lead him and guide him and bless him as he goes. And Stacy as well. I'm not sure if she's going on the trip with him, but just bless that couple and watch over them, we ask, and bless all that we talk about today in Christ's name. Amen.
So yeah, we're on the series on the church. Last week, what did we talk about last week? We had Jeremy here, Madras Jeremy. Jeremy.
Yeah, we talked a little bit. Well, the first week was kind of, what is the church? Why does it exist? The second week had to do with what's the purpose of the church? Why is it left here on earth? And
Yeah.
I believe that's right so far.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the
was
wrong-
that
Yeah.
was last week the second week?
It was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
was.
we talked about some of the challenge of doing mission, like what mission looks like in 2021, just because things are so different than they were even 20 years ago, 30 years ago in the American church, that some of the same tactics that we used to rely on to grow are no longer completely reliable. So yeah, last week was mostly like mission outside the church, which is really what we should be doing. I mean, this is what we're here for, is we come together, we gather together to get built up so that we can scatter and be on mission. So, and yet, there is something that happens when we gather too, if it's gospel-centered, if it's gospel-based and everything has to do with the gospel, where we should want to also have outsiders experience that and see that firsthand, what goes on, and obviously hear the gospel, but see the gospel in action,
Right.
and what a gospel community looks like. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So last week was more mission outside the church. This week is going to be more mission inside the church, which is actually debated. It's actually controversial.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised even recently. We've had a couple conversations with some guys that we respect and like, and when we talked about kind of who our target is as far as Sunday mornings go, there was some difference of opinion. And one of the things that book talked about, we've used these terms before, but that you've got the people that are churched, you've got people that are de-churched, and you've got people that are unchurched. And I think most Sunday morning services are kind of catered towards the churched.
Yes.
And that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
it's a good thing.
Well, because the church is what? Like, just to briefly
The
remind
gathering of believers.
There you go.
There's
The church
saved,
is-
saved people
yeah.
that are, or at least claiming to be.
Yes.
And that are there because they identify with that group of people.
Sure.
Whereas the de-churched, I would say, would be people that are, for
Not-
whatever reason.
non-affiliated.
Yeah,
Unaffiliated.
they're unaffiliated. A lot of times because they've just given up on the church in
Sure.
general, or, they've gotten hurt, or they've moved away,
Right, sure.
just gotten disfranchised, whatever it is. Or
A lot of
walked
them would
away.
claim to be believers,
Yep.
Right.
but they don't have anything to do with the church because the church is messed up and they're
Right.
not. Yeah.
And then unchurched would be who?
People who have yet to come to church, come to faith in Christ,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who do we target?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's,
in any and all.
And are they welcome?
yeah.
And if they are welcome in our gatherings, how should that affect our gatherings?
Right.
Like the
Yep.
way we think, the way we do what we do when we come together, and that's primarily, I think, what we want to hit on today.
Yeah.
So I kind of, when I got off drugs, I went through a 12-step program, and they used to do these readings at the beginning of every single, and one of the lines that constantly stuck with me in the reading was, the newcomer is the most important person at any meeting. And I used to like that idea. And of course, most of the 12-step stuff, even though it's not Christ-based, they ripped like all of the principles and the ideas that they have from the Bible. And I just like that idea that was promoted, that was reminded, everyone was reminded by that every time they got together in a meeting, was even though you're here, you've been here, you need to be here, you're not the most important person here. It's that new person. And it makes me always think of even the paralytic. You got that picture in Mark 2 where Jesus' house is crowded with people being brought to him, and you've got these dudes that are like, we got to find a way in here. Like, there's no way we're going to stand in line. And they get up on the roof, take tiles apart, lower this guy through, and that's the idea to me with the unchurched and the people
Right.
that, like, we should have that mind where we're willing to go to any length and do anything we can to get that new person to Jesus.
Well, and the other part of that is that the gathering was so tight-knit and so kind of closed off that a newcomer couldn't find their way
Right.
in.
Yes.
Somebody who needed to get in desperately
Yes.
couldn't find a way in.
Yes.
And that's kind of tragic to think about.
No, that's exactly the
Yeah.
problem.
Yet the
actually.
church is kind of can be like that
Yeah.
today, even.
It's interesting to kind of always think about, if the newcomer is the one that we're hoping to be able to reach when they come in some way. What's their experience like when they come in? And to try to always go back, because I think when you've been in church for a long period of time, you start to forget about
Sure.
that.
Sure.
And so what is it like for them to walk in, and what are they experiencing? And how can we
Exactly.
be thoughtful about that?
And so I think,
Yeah.
in light of what we're talking about today, we can only speak to it really in our context. I know that we've all been to different churches. We've been through different churches and had our impressions of, if I was a newcomer, how was my experience? You know what I mean? Like, how are these guys doing? But when we planted the door, there was a lot of thought and intention that went into how we actually conduct our services, what's included, what's not included, how it's done, like the flavor of it. Some people may be thinking, oh, you're tripping too hard on that stuff. You're being too seeker sensitive.
Right.
What would you say to that?
Well, again, who was our target at that time? We were primarily searching for those who were dechurched and unchurched, as opposed to trying to pull Christians from other churches.
And we got quite a few of them.
If your goal is to just pull Christians from other churches in, it's going to change how you do things. If your
Right.
goal is to reach those that aren't being reached otherwise,
Right.
it just changes a lot.
Right.
And so, since that was our, and then as we've grown, we've had to learn that, okay, now we have a bunch of church people with us.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be mindful of them. You have to minister to them. The church is there for all of those groups.
The church exists because of the believers in the church.
Yeah.
Like they are what makes up the church.
But I think you can get to that point where you just kind of grow to a place where you forget about
Yeah.
the initial mission and who
Yeah.
we're called to to go after. And that's what was kind of disheartening even in some of the discussions we had recently with a couple of guys,
Yeah.
where they just kind of said, no, the Sunday morning church is for Christians.
Yeah.
And
Put up a fence.
and not, if a non-believer comes in, that's great, but it's not, you're not really, putting any focus or mind or thought to that is how I received it. It was kind of like, boy, that's weird to me.
Sure.
I think there's a difference in mindset if you're trying to grow a church, right? That's
Yeah.
one mindset compared to like if you're trying to make Christ accessible to people.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of a mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the end result maybe is like each one is going to bring people in, but how you do church, so to speak, is going to be different with one mindset versus
So that's
the
actually
other.
one of my questions. I'll just skip to it since you brought it up because that's a super good point. And I think this is one of the points this is one of the reasons people kick against this idea is it possible for the gathered church to be missionally minded? Actually, let's explain that first because there might be some people that are watching. Like when we say missionally minded, what do we mean by that?
Get in a plane, travel over the ocean. No, that's good.
Take your money, drop it in the box, hope that it gets to Uganda. No.
Yeah, I think
Right, and those
missions-
things are okay, right? We just pray
No,
for
they're
Glenn.
fine.
He's
They're
going to hop
fine.
on a plane and cross the ocean and
They are,
train
but
pastors, and that's fantastic.
when we say missionary,
Yeah.
that's usually where our mind
Right.
goes. So
We don't think us.
yeah,
We
Right.
think them.
Right.
yeah.
So
Which
it-
the same thing applies to us though. We're in a foreign culture. We're exiles. That's kind of how we're supposed to view ourselves. So right now, how do we engage the culture around us with the Great Commission that Jesus has given us to make disciples of all nations
There you go.
and to teach people to obey all that He's commanded?
Mm-hmm.
That's what the church exists here to do, and so that's the mission.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't think most of us think about ourselves as missionaries, kind of where we're at, right? To your point, like we think about going over there,
Right.
going somewhere else.
Sure.
But just maybe God has placed you in the neighborhood that you live in and the job that you work, your kids in the school that they're in, because you have this built-in mission field where you don't necessarily have to go somewhere else. You
Right.
can,
Right.
but you don't have to. And I just think most of us don't think that way.
Do we not think that way because we just don't? We've been trained
Well-
to think, or is it because we don't want to think that way?
I think like I can hop on a plane and go across an ocean to a foreign country and I can be considered a weirdo.
Yeah.
And who cares? I'm probably never going to see those people again. So who cares what they think of me?
Sure.
But my neighbor, if my neighbor thinks I'm weird, I got to see my neighbor every day. Like
Yeah.
the stakes are higher.
There you go.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, mission's always uncomfortable because you're you're clearly coming in with an agenda to try to reach them and to convince them of something. And but the funny thing I was thinking about, even in regards to mission, is for those guys that were talking about how Sundays are just for Christians, you're assuming that everybody in your church is a Christian,
Right.
and that is already a problem.
Right.
Because I think if you just look across the landscape of America and those who call themselves Christians and attend churches, sure there are Christians in that mix, but there are definitely non-believers in there. People that may not know
Right.
they're not a believer.
No doubt about it.
But
Yeah.
but mission has to exist even within the church. The idea
For
of
sure.
making disciples and teaching people to obey Christ's commands, that's all part of that. It's not just outside the church; it happens right inside, regardless of who's in your church.
No doubt.
That makes
no
me
doubt
think about Matthew 7, right? Where these people come to Jesus and they say, look at all these things that we've done for
Yep.
you.
Right.
Right? Who's he talking to? Who are these people? These people that's the church crowd. Like Jesus, I've taught Sunday school. I was an usher. I dropped money in the box. I served it, helped hand out food. And his response to some of them was like, I don't even know who you are.
Yeah,
That's kind of a sobering thing.
we haven't met yet.
Right.
It's like,
And
what?
these are people that like the in crowd, the church crowd, and Jesus is saying, I don't know you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Don't
that
say
just
stuff
means
like
that
Sorry.
that just means that we have to be the idea of mission existing, in our Sunday mornings. That has to exist there too.
Yeah.
So and again, if you're a gospel-centered church where you're constantly preaching those things,
To me, that's the key.
then it's going to be
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, there's times where like we're going to be doing the town hall. That's more of an insider type thing. There's times the church does business within the church that might be exclusive characteristics of the believers gathered. But if the church is really continuing in what they ought to be continuing in, it's missional. It's missional whether it's to the outsider or the insider, because the gospel is the constant.
Sure,
Right?
the message is the same. It's interesting, we were talking about this. I was texting with Jeremy this morning, who's tuned in, by the way.
What's up, Jeremy?
But we started this conversation in a text thread with some other guys about some of this stuff, and it's like the gospel is for the believer and the unbeliever. It's not a different message for both.
Correct.
Believers need the gospel. Unbelievers need the gospel. We all need to repent. We all need to believe.
Sure.
And so the message, it's bigger than believer versus unbeliever.
Mm-hmm.
We all need the gospel.
For sure.
Yep.
So why would you guys, I think we'll just speak to it a little more. Would it be valid for the gathered church to be missionally minded when it gathers? And why? I mean, we already kind of spoke to it because the gospel is everything, and that is missionally minded, whether it's to those who have been won or those who have yet to be
It's
won.
scary to think about what happens when we stop doing that.
Yeah.
Because now what is
Then
the
what
church-
are we doing?
What is the church even doing? What's it about?
Yeah, why do we exist?
So absolutely, it needs to continue to be that way.
Sure.
And we always have to kind of keep that edge towards mission
Right.
within our congregation.
Mm-hmm.
When we lose that, then it's almost like water stops going out.
Yeah.
It just is going to become a stagnant.
Right.
Well, we've been in one of those, right?
Yep.
You and I existed
Yeah.
for a few years in a congregation that they were so knowledgeable and so mature in so many ways as Christians, and yet there was no mission at all. There was no mind toward, even though they were gospel minded, they weren't using the weapon the way it's meant to be used. We were almost like keeping it to ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's not meant to be kept to ourselves. I mean, the beauty of the gospel and one of the giving qualities of the gospel is that it's reciprocal. It's that it's constantly outgoing. It's not something that you hide under a bushel, right?
No.
Yeah. No. Sit on tag. Oh no, that's a different song.
So many other things in our life are geared to what you're talking about, though. We like our cliques and we like our clubs, even if we don't call them that.
Yeah.
And like one of my waking thoughts this morning, as I was just thinking about what we're going to talk about, I was thinking about some of the clubs that things like Rotary and Kiwanis and the Elks and the Eagles and the other kind of animal type clubs. Like we like those things, but they exist solely for their members.
Yeah.
Right. And the difference of the church is that it exists at least in part for those who have yet to be a
good.
part of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have, so we can easily take this mindset though into the church of this is my club, these are my people. I want to maintain what it is. I like hanging out with people that are like me.
Yeah.
I don't want to be around people who aren't like me. And if we get too missional, that's going to bring in people that aren't like me. So we got to
Well, in a
be
gospel
careful
center,
there.
a gospel center church, a church where the gospel is really on display, is going to be a messy church.
Right.
Yes.
And we've
Absolutely.
seen that over the years, and
Yes.
a lot of people don't want a messy church.
Right.
No, they don't, because it's about them. There's not an outward thinking that's going on
Right.
like you're talking to, Chad. And you're right. The nature of the gospel is outward.
Right.
It's not something that can ever be held onto. It's something that constantly has to go forward and
Right.
forward and forward. So let's go all the way back around to where we started. Is it possible for the gathered church to be missionally minded while simultaneously not compromising or skimping practices and teachings that are exclusive to the church? Because this is really where the debate comes down to, is that most people think of it as one or the other. If you're doing this, you're not really doing that, and if you're doing this, you're not really doing that. Is that true?
I don't think it has to be. And one of the things we've said in the past, and I had a question about it, but I'll just go into it, is the idea that we are theologically conservative, but methodologically liberal at the door.
Yes.
And so, I mean,
I like that.
what does that mean?
Yeah.
The theologically conservative is that we hold to orthodoxy, big word, but just historic Christian beliefs. The message of the gospel doesn't change as time changes or as culture changes. The message of the gospel has been what it's been from the beginning, and it's no different now, and we hold tightly to that. That being said, the methods with which we reach people, that can change over time and should probably change over time.
Yeah.
As culture changes and as people change. I think you said, like, the things that worked 20 years ago to draw people into the church don't necessarily work today, right?
Well,
Yeah.
even the idea that we looked at last week, if attractional meetings aren't going to work and we need to have attractional communities, that just means we've got to think differently about the way we're doing things. And,
Right.
and how does that, how do you adjust to that mindset within the church? And,
Sure.
Well,
and
even-
then, oh, go ahead.
Even from one context to the next, what works here might not work, for Jeremy if in Madras, for example.
Right.
There's different contexts.
Well, context
For
is
sure.
what contextualization. The idea again of we're dealing with a message that's always relevant,
Right.
always true,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the context that somebody's going to receive that in or understand that in is very different. For a long time in America, everybody kind of had some biblical framework,
Right.
And now that you can't assume that any longer,
Right.
Right.
and so we have to kind of think differently about all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
I had a neat conversation with a guy earlier in the year. I went to a conference kind of just before COVID was a thing, and we had about a 2-hour drive with this guy that I didn't know very well, but we were both here in Central Oregon going to this thing over in the valley and rode together. And when he found out I was a pastor, he just asked me, like, "What's the Bible about?" He was in his mid to late 20s. He's like, I've never read the Bible. I don't even know what it's about.
Yeah.
And it just kind of shocked me a little bit because
So in America,
I just kind of had this assumption, right,
Yeah.
that like was an eye-opening thing that not everybody.
I remember even in Awana
That's
years
familiarity.
ago, we helped over at CBC. This is probably 15, 16 years ago, maybe 17, I don't know, long time ago. And you would go through these verses with the kids, Old Testament verses, and you say something about Moses, and they're like, I don't know who Moses is. That was that long ago.
Yeah.
Moses? It's like,
Yeah.
how do you not know who Moses is? And they don't.
Yeah. So that's actually what I find exciting. Like I've said this before, I kind of love the times we're living in right now as the church, because it used to be assumed that people even had an understanding of the gospel. Even if they didn't believe it, they could probably repeat like a reasonable facsimile
Sure.
of it to you
Right.
if you asked them. And now when we go places sometimes and have conversations with people, it's so rad that some of these people have no idea what it is. And I don't mean that to their detriment. I
Yeah.
mean that to the sense that we're actually carrying something now and dispensing something to the world. We have something
Yeah.
that they need and haven't heard before, that
Right.
they're not familiar with, that is completely different than anything that they know.
Yeah.
And that's just a cool thing.
It is
Yeah,
exciting.
totally.
Well, and so this goes back to then when somebody comes into our church, into our, into this room, how we sound, what we say, the way we say it
Yep.
matters.
Yep.
Right.
And so we've had to adjust from where we were years ago, and I'm sure you've done the same thing. I mean, I remember being in a church where the more Greek words we could say,
There you go.
the more cool things we could talk about that were impressive to the people out there, the better. And
Yes.
so we tried to be as lofty as possible. It was funny because my oldest son, when he came to the door the first time, he's like, "What? You guys have changed everything."
Yeah.
And he was mad about it because he wanted it to be like,
You guys are
still-
stupid.
Yeah, you
Like,
guys
you take stupid
you've
pills?
dumbed it all down. Is kind of, but in a way, and I don't think we have completely, but we tried to make it accessible to the new believer that
Exactly.
walks in and to the person that's been a Christian for 50 years.
Exactly. So those are ways that we could be methodologically conscious,
Correct.
or missionally conscious in our gatherings, is just by the language we use, the way that we talk to people when we're preaching the word. Because there's a lot of people that try to be scholarly and try to use a lot of big words and will speak Christianese. They'll use these words that people now have never heard before, and they're going to we're going to make them feel like an outsider just by the fact that
Right.
we're not talking to them. We're talking to these other people who know what we're talking about.
Yep.
That sucks.
That's one of the things that I've really appreciated about you guys and just our time as being a part of the door. Like I've learned from that in
To
a
be dumber?
pretty significant way. not to be dumber, but
Check your head at the door.
to be more accessible.
Yeah.
And to help make Christ more accessible to the people that desperately need Him.
I
Yeah.
don't assume anymore that somebody.
There you go.
I've been in churches before where you'll say, "All right, Elisha. You guys are all
Yeah.
familiar with the story of Elisha." They're not.
Yeah.
So you need to tell them who that
Right.
is. And
Yeah.
if you use a word like propitiation, great word, a word we should never lose in the church.
Yeah.
But you've got to break
Right.
it down.
Explain it.
Yeah.
You need to let somebody know what that means because they're not going to know.
That's funny, dude. We had in young adult group 2 weeks ago. I had thrown out a question to the young adults at one point. Said, "Okay, you guys got 1 minute on an airplane with someone next to you who's just asked you what the gospel is. Go." And like one of the gals like starts talking and she uses the word propitiation, and when she was done, I said, "Would you actually use that word?" And she kind of looked at the ground and smiled and said, "No, I wouldn't use that word. It's like good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a great word.
It's a fantastic
Yeah,
word.
for sure.
Yeah,
But I think that again, without compromising truth and without really diving too fully into the world. You know,
Yep.
I mean, I think you can go so far with it that you almost kind of
Sure.
Yeah, sure you can.
gets a little gross,
Sure.
and we don't want to do that either. But they ought to be able to just say, oh, this is somebody that I can relate to. The way they're talking, the way they're
Totally.
speaking, the things they're saying, this is relatable.
Totally.
Because I think so many people come into a church, one, they have preconceived ideas about Christians, and they have preconceived ideas about what the church is like.
Right.
Sure.
And I think if you can kind of dispel some of that immediately, you've almost made them kind of go, okay,
Completely.
maybe this is something I can
Completely.
hear
Right.
and do. And
So that's a reasonable way for us to be missionally minded when the church gathers,
Right.
is by how we speak. Are we
Yeah.
being mindful that not everybody that's in front of us is on the same level, and are we wanting all of them to have an understanding of what we're saying, not just some of them?
yeah,
Well, and
One-
even how much we speak, right?
Yeah, there you
go. Talking to Jeremy about this yesterday too, that just the length of sermons, like
Yeah.
it just helps make it accessible or less accessible for people depending on how you approach how long you preach.
Yeah, so another way I was thinking, since we can just run on this for a little while, like what are some of what this looks like in the context of the door? Sharing time.
right.
It's one of those things that has had unchurched people that have visited for whatever reason actually return.
Yep.
Is because they couldn't believe that there wasn't a couple professionals running everything, and everybody else was like basically didn't matter. They were just
Yeah.
there to put money in the box for that guy. But that it was like participatory. Is that correct?
There you go. You got
Yeah.
it.
I want to make sure I added all the syllables. So
You
like
got to sound it up. Particip.
so like this was like a team sport. Like it mattered all of a sudden that everybody was in
Yeah.
the gathering. It didn't matter if some people weren't there because you don't see them, hear from them anyway. But that thing put on display the fact that it's actually community, that we're all in this thing together. We're all necessary components, and that we all make each other better. We all make the gathering better. We all make the gospel more full.
Yeah.
When-
Yeah, the church versus my church or our church. If you can get people to think that way, it changes everything.
Right.
And that there's a lot of different ways to get people to buy into that.
Sure.
Sharing time is one thing, but service is the other one.
Sure.
The minute you begin to serve in a church, all of a sudden there's ownership. I'm part of this thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not just disconnected from. I'm not watching from a distance. I'm in this.
Yeah, you get to come off the bench
Yep.
and get onto the field.
So creating opportunities for people to
Yes.
use their gifts and to be, and again, not just in I don't know. I think sometimes we just come up with ways to kind of placate people
For
and
sure.
say, sure, you can, do this.
For sure.
But I mean, actually meaningful ways to serve.
Yeah.
And-
Here's a sparkler.
Participation ribbon. Thank you for being here. Yeah.
That's awesome. But so beyond even the opportunity for people to get on the field and like be part of the game is also the way it's done. So like part of what I love about the share time, but even the pulpit time, another thing we put into the pulpit because we're missionally minded is honesty. Like like honesty matters. It matters. That's a way to be missionally minded is by Christians being honest.
Yeah.
I grew up. I talked about this last week in my sermon. I grew up in a church where I just didn't see that. No one was really honest, transparent. Everyone was putting on the same face and very guarded with their personal lives. And it made me feel like, as a completely imperfect human being, like they knew something I didn't. They had something I didn't. Like something was wrong with
And
me.
I'm a freak. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Something was wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I think that's something the church hasn't done well. And again, this is, I think, something that goes in the category of being missionally minded. This is not just a benefit for unchurched people coming in. This is something we all need. But I think it's something that we ought to be intentional about. It's just being transparent. And it doesn't mean you air all your laundry all the time and you get as crazy and nasty and detailed as you can. But it means that we're honest about who we are and why we're here.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, that goes along. Authenticity is something that people crave, and
Sure.
they know when it's not there, and it's it's almost one of those things that people are disgusted by now. When you're not being real and truthful, and it kind of ruins everything.
Yeah.
And churches have become so much about being polished and perfect and precise, and everything looking just so, all
Yep.
the people smiling and everybody doing, that it just feels like there's this kind of weird fakeness about it that people don't like.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it was you could not do it that way.
Right.
The door was the first chance that, because again, we just started something, and
Sure.
it was the first time that I realized we can be ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
don't pull the curtain back all the way,
Yeah.
but some of the way. I'm just
And it
saying.
makes you question yourself because it's messy, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what we're trying to protect. We always think,
Yeah.
Christian equals polished, like
Yep.
clean, which it does positionally.
Yeah, and that's the good point though, is that
Yeah.
we are sinners who have the righteousness of Christ given to us. That's what makes us righteous. But so many churches act like, no, the
Exactly.
righteousness is in me, and
Exactly.
I have to pretend it's there.
Right.
And that's where it gets really weird.
It
So,
does.
Yeah. That's where a gospel-centered church is going to be messy.
Right.
Because-
I came away from last Sunday's service down in La Pine. Like we had, some people in sharing time that shared some kind of heavy things, and
Yeah.
we had some tears. And I came away from that thinking not that it was cool that we had tears, but just that people felt like they could be vulnerable, that they could stand up and share. Like, here's a hard thing going on in my life. Will you please pray for me?
Yeah.
I was excited about that. I mean, there were some hard things. Obviously that we weren't excited about those things in and of themselves. But that people felt like this is my family. I can get up. I can share this. I can kind of bare my soul.
Exactly.
To an extent, and then just to see people respond and come around those people. What a neat thing that
Yeah.
was.
Well, and to the point is that we have some unchurched people, some non-believers that sit week in and week
Right.
out,
And they see that.
and that's part of the reason they keep coming back week
Right.
in and week out, and it might just be one of those things that God uses to win them to the gospel,
Right.
is to see authentic gospel community that's not trying to pretend to be something that they're not.
Right.
That's something like that is being missionally minded. If it wasn't there, it wouldn't have the ability to be effective.
Right.
Right?
That's
So,
something we
it
have to
matters.
continue to do
Gotta
as
be
well,
intentional.
because if we don't model that from the front and make sure everybody knows this is like a safe place
Mm-hmm.
somewhat, if we're not modeling that transparency continually, then it's going to kind of change.
Sure.
Because I've seen, there's a lot of pastors that they've been taught, or they just believe that they can't ever let anybody in. They can't ever
Right.
let-
Exactly.
see what's really happening to the truth about them, their family, anything. And so they're so guarded, so pulled away. And the whole church feels that way because
Yep.
it just kind of follows suit.
Exactly. Another one, which go ahead.
I just want to say, this is a bit of a side note, but I had a cool comment come in a little while ago, and I've been trying to figure out where to interject it. But you talked about the categories of the church, the unchurched, and the dechurched. Jacques says, "Thank you from the rechurched." And so we can add another category
I
to
like that.
the re-churched.
Which is the cool part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Like when you see somebody that comes back and went, wait a minute, I can be a part of this again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to be a part of this.
Yeah. So
That's
I
awesome.
guess the de-churched can become the re-churched
Right.
if they find a way back in, if they
Right.
can be won over again. And we've seen that a lot too, right?
Yeah.
Where people have been bruised, hurt, whether it's valid or not valid, because a lot of it's not. A lot of people look for reasons to be offended and leave the church.
Yeah.
But some of them are legit, where they've been scarred. And then they come back in and they go, wow, I didn't know something like this existed. Which sounds funny because we know we're not unique. It shouldn't be as unique as it is
Right.
to find the kind of gospel community and missional mindset that we have when we come together. So we have obviously like honesty, authenticity, the way we communicate to each other, participation, that it's not a spectator sport. But going back to the beginning, that we are most interested, I think, in the person we don't know that comes in, because we can get so cliquish, we can get so comfortable and tend towards locking down us for no more,
Right.
right? And we recently had, we've got a couple interesting characters in La Pine. We've obviously had them here over the years at 3R, but we got a couple characters that come from week to week down there that are, they're just different kind of people. And there's this one gal in particular, I know she doesn't watch this, that
You hope she does.
that well, this is complimentary if she does, that comes week after week, week in, week out, and she's just a different kind of gal, and she's really outward. She's really social and
Excited to be there.
Very
you
much.
know that she's there.
Yeah.
When she's in the room, everybody knows that she's there, which goes to what I'm gonna say is there's been times during the sermons even when she's got up and like walked over and kind of talked to somebody else or disrupted, and there was a time we had a gentleman who's been in the church for a long time come to us and basically like, you gonna do something about this? And it's like, no, we're not gonna do something. Like, what should we do? And it again comes back to us looking at those people and saying, above all else, let's see how we can drop these people through the roof to Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, why in the world, just for the sake of everything being proper, right, and clean in a worship service, sometimes things are gonna be messy because of the people that we are allowing into our midst in hopes that we
Right.
get them to Christ. And that's a problem with the church is this dude's type thinking,
Yeah.
you know, is that, oh my gosh, like this has disrupted the agenda, the show.
Sure. My club is being
Yeah.
infringed upon.
Yeah. Someone's disrupting the movie right now.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, we allow for disruptions here.
I mean, the reality is that the message that we're, the word that we're preaching and the gospel message itself is going to be an obstacle for people. And it's going to be hard for them to get past that. We don't need to create more obstacles for them to
Right.
get by before they get to that.
Exactly.
And I think we just have a way of doing that. And I know we get flack for it, but that's part of the reason that we purposefully don't get political. If you walk into a church and you see a group of people that you know are on the opposite side of things of you, and that's the vibe they're giving off, you put an obstacle there.
It's an obstacle.
And that's why, so, like, do we have a definite idea of a political stance and view and
Yeah.
candidates and things? Absolutely, we do.
Sure we do.
And it's probably not a whole lot different than a lot of people's. But when you know that half the country is on one side of that and half the country is on the other, and we're supposed to reach both with the gospel, get that obstacle out of the church.
Exactly.
It doesn't need to be there. And it doesn't mean that we don't stand for things that are moral
Correct.
and, you know, obviously the church needs to do that. So I'm not
Correct.
talking about, you know, those kinds of things, social issues and cultural issues. We need to make a stand on what's right,
Right.
before the Lord. But when it comes to some of these things, I mean, think about all the obstacles that church has put in the way of people
Correct.
to keep them from getting to the gospel.
Right.
Right. Which goes against the missional mindset.
Yeah.
It
No,
goes
the way-
against the missional effectiveness that we're talking about.
Yeah.
A lot of times we expect people to act like Christians when they're not.
No.
And it's like, what do you expect? These people are, you know what I
Right.
mean?
They're going to
not
come in
really-
wearing the wrong
How
clothes.
do they get there?
They're going to come in wearing the wrong clothes, saying the wrong things. We had somebody recently at a baptism that swore, you know, when they got in the water.
Three
It's like-
times, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was, yeah.
It wasn't just once.
That's not something you normally see in a church. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's going to be weird. It's going to be messy. We've seen some goofy things over the years. Even a dog take communion one time, and the woman was drunk that had the dog. You know,
Yep.
it was an odd thing to see. And there's part of you that wants to like tackle
Yeah.
that person and throw him out the door. And
Yeah,
say,
have the
"No."
bouncers get them out.
And yet, at some point, we have to be willing to put our personal comforts and preferences aside for the sake of the gospel.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for us to do.
Yeah, I would say
Right.
at most points we do.
Yeah.
Like we're supposed to be the mature ones that know that already have come to the reality that we've been saved from much.
Yep.
You know,
Right.
and if we're really wanting that same thing for other people, we're going to be willing to endure
Totally.
a lot of things.
Yeah.
and rightly so.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Noises, I mean, kids, that's the other thing. We do the same thing with kids that come into the service. You know, a kid comes in and is disruptive, and it's like, you need to get that kid out of here.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, Jesus said, let him come. And,
Yeah.
and we need to think that way too.
we have several young
Yep.
kids coming now down there. We have no child care, no babysitting for them because of the whole COVID thing. One couple's a brand new couple that's been for the last 3 weeks
3
in
weeks,
a row.
yeah.
And when I asked them, you know, went and shook their hand and got to know them, like where have you been going to church prior to this? And they're like, nowhere. Like, we just haven't gone anywhere. And this wife just had it in her that for some reason we need to go check this place out. They've been 3 weeks now. They got a 6-month-old baby, just the sweetest
Cutest
thing.
baby you'll ever see.
And we're in a gymnasium, so they just lay this blanket down and put that baby down. But I make sure that we went up to them
Yeah.
and said, if she cries,
Like, it's
we're
okay.
good. If she laughs, we're good. If she talks, we're good. Like,
Yeah.
we're just glad that you're here. We're glad that your baby's here. Like, don't worry about any
Right.
of that.
So you're
you
taking
know?
that obstacle away so that they
Yeah.
can, that, you know, that's what we have to find. We have to always think that way.
Yep.
And so the way that we act, the way that we look even,
Yep.
all those things are ways that we can do that.
Sure.
Because again, if
Yeah.
you come in and you know, not that there's anything wrong with dressing up on Sunday mornings,
Sure.
but you go into some churches and everybody's in their Sunday best.
Sure.
Somebody comes in that doesn't have that, you know, again,
It's a barrier.
Right.
just constantly thinking about the methods and the way we're communicating to
Yeah.
people.
Well, even our ugliness of our decor that has been ripped on from time to time because it's too manly, masculine.
Yeah.
That's all intentional too. The colors are intentional, the font's intentional, the simplicity of it's intentional, so that we're just taking away those barriers that are Christianese, that are causing separations the moment that people walk through the door.
Yeah,
Simple things like
we've said
that.
it before, and it's not meant to demean other churches or to
No.
be, but I think it's like your own house. You know, you can live in a place so long that you get used to everything around you that you stop seeing it. And I think churches have done that. So many churches you walk into, and it's literally like stepping back in time. And so anybody that's walking in is going to look around and feel like, you know, did I come come through a wormhole
Yep.
into the 70s
Yep.
because you've got all the same stuff that's been there forever, and it has just a certain look, tone, feel. And so we purposefully, you like, can we, what do you call it? You call it de-church it. But,
Yeah.
but the idea of like when we went to Riverwoods, it was like, we need to come in here and clear everything
It
out
was
of here.
plastic plants and plaques of verses everywhere and
Yeah.
precious moments pictures.
Yep.
And it was like, this is horrible. Like we're gonna undo this.
Yeah. Well, it reinforces all of those preconceived notions that somebody has when they walk in. It's like,
Right.
I've been to this church before, I know exactly what to expect. Whereas when they walk into something and they see some chain link and some different colors and some stuff, it's like, okay, wait a minute, this is different.
Yeah.
And again, is there part of it that, we want to be different and cool because that's just, maybe a little bit.
Well,
but most of it is
we
not
like good
that.
taste too.
I mean,
Right.
we definitely have strong opinions about things, even music and stuff. There's all of those, but it again is the heart of it is so that when somebody walks in that's an
Missional.
unbeliever, it's missional. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember years ago, many years ago, I was part of a church, and we had a members meeting one time, and somebody in the members meeting suggested that we get a couple of those smokers poles and put them outside,
Oh,
just to make.
I was
church-
thinking two different things when you said that. Neither of them were good.
The ashtray,
Yep.
the poles,
Yep.
kind of
gotcha.
things.
We have one out back.
And the suggestion was, let's get a couple of those so that maybe people who smoke would come to church and feel like they could go take a smoke break or whatever. And
Let's put a portable bar out front with a couple taps on it.
and the members, it went off the rails at that point. People
Yeah.
are like, if we do that, then we're going to get smokers in our church.
Yeah,
and
right.
we don't want that. And,
Yeah.
and I just am like, my heart just sunk when that conversation unfolded because it's like, you're just not even thinking, with a gospel
Yeah.
missional mindset. Like this is a club.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate. It was
The
sad.
early days of the door, I thought it was cool. I know that some people, raised an eyebrow, especially the ones that were bringing younger kids, but it was that way.
Yeah.
Is when you approached the church, you had to go through a cloud of cigarette smoke to get into the front door of the church. And there would be times where we would even have police that would show up at the beginning of Sunday service and walk the
Chase a
aisles,
guy
and it's
out.
like,
Yeah.
who are you looking for? Like maybe I can save you some time, Like I'll point it was kind of brutal, but it was overflowing ashtrays and cigarette poles and stuff. It was like you were coming to an AA meeting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was okay. Like it was okay.
We had
Yeah.
once where we got locked out of the bathroom and we were like, we're locked out, we don't have a key. Is there anybody here that could
Like
break
all
into
I
the
am,
bathroom? Like 4 guys did. It was like, oh, we got this covered.
Yeah, it was rad.
No problem.
That's awesome.
Interesting verse here. I want to get your guys' opinion on it real quick. This is by the Apostle Paul. 1 Corinthians 14, I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. If the whole church comes together and all speak in tongues and outsiders or unbelievers enter, they not say that you're out of your minds, but if all prophesy and an unbeliever or outsider enters, he is convicted by all. He is called to account by all. The secrets of his heart are disclosed, and so falling on his face, he will worship God and declare that God is really among you. And of course, this is this long dialogue that's going on, with is it better to prophesy or speak in tongues? And of course, we have the questions of what are these, but apart from answering what is prophecy here according to Paul and what is tongues and where's its place in the church, there's a principle here. There's a point that Paul is making, and this is the point that I think we're trying to bring out and bring about is that it is valid for us to be missionally minded when we gather in hopes that or expecting that non-believers will come in among us, even if it's becoming less, like we talked about last week, that they are there and that there will be times when they will be there. And I believe that what he's saying is these things are good. These are, things that the church does, but this is more important, that you're mindful of the newcomer again. It comes back to the most important person, right?
Well, that could just become another obstacle that you've placed in. And that's part of the thing I don't like about some of the crazy stuff that's going on in churches right now is that you almost want there to be this sideshow that attracts people. And so the weirder you can make it, the more, if you've got some feathers falling from the sky or whatever,
Glitter.
there's this kind of thing where, that's the whole point is to get people in with this kind of, I'll call it a freak show even. And again, there's a lot of people that are going to say, yeah, you guys are nuts.
Yep.
I want nothing to do with that.
For sure.
So now you've created an obstacle to get them to the goodness, the real thing
Yeah.
of Christ.
Yes.
And that's so whatever it is, whether it's tongues or
Yes.
we need to find ways to get that stuff. Again, if we want to be known for something at the door,
Yes.
like if in our community, if we could be known for something, what would it be? that we are people that love God
Yes.
and that we love people,
Yeah.
and we care, and there's practical.
Well, that
outworkings
Jesus
to
is
those
preeminent,
things.
right?
Absolutely.
And if they want to think that he's weird, that's fine. Like, that's fair game.
Right.
But if we're dealing with communion, which the church does when it comes together, even if there's non-believers, that's a picture of the gospel.
Yep.
If we're doing baptisms, that's a picture of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
If we're proclaiming Christ through the Word of God, preaching the gospel, that's the gospel.
and
Like,
loving each
those are-
other,
Yeah.
loving each other in community the way that we're called to
Yeah.
as Christians is
Yeah.
such a powerful evidence of Christ in us.
Yeah.
That's again like that's enough.
gospel. Yeah,
that's
gospel
what we
picture.
need to see
Exactly.
in the church, not all this other stuff. That we get
No,
so
you're
caught
right.
up
We
in.
don't need to do tricks.
No.
We don't need more smoke, more mirrors.
Part of what Paul's drilling down on there too, in a broad sense, is just accessibility and understanding.
Yeah.
People aren't going to respond to the things that they don't understand,
There you go.
and they are going to respond to the things that they do understand. And so
Yep.
it's about, again, making Christ accessible to people.
Exactly.
Even the program stuff that we can get involved in, we'll draw people into the church. But again, they're there because it becomes something that benefits their family or
No
their
doubt.
kid. I mean, it's not gospel.
Yeah.
It's more like, yeah, this is a cool place to hang out. And some churches now even have crazy stuff like whole wings that are devoted to kind of Christianity. Which there again, there's no, and at the door you don't see any of that. And
Yeah.
it's we want Christ to be magnified, His work,
Yeah.
His personal work magnified. The rest of the stuff is
Yeah.
we're not going to be real attractional to most people probably,
Yeah.
which is kind of weird. I mean, as far as like if you're coming there for a show or for a,
Right.
whatever.
Which is another thing
not the draw.
worth pointing out, is because we have been accused at times of maybe not caring about this or not caring about that, not caring about worship. And the reason people come to that conclusion is because we're not doing what most churches do with the kind of people that come and the way that the music's done, and the way that it's presented like a show. We don't do that not because we don't care about worship. We don't do that because we're trying to strip down these other wow factors that you have to keep people with and that you're trying to draw people with. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, because that can end up being, I mean, when you talk to some people and say, oh, what church do you go to? And then ask why, most often they'll say the worship is amazing.
Exactly.
That's why they go.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's the teaching like? I don't care.
Exactly.
Worship is amazing. And it's like, well, wait a minute. It doesn't mean we don't, there's always ways we can improve these things. And,
Sure.
and
Well, we
make
all
them better.
like good.
Yeah.
We're not anti-good worship.
Right,
We
yeah.
like good worship, but it can be so flashy. There could be so much emphasis put on it that it de-emphasizes
Right.
what we actually want to attract people with.
Yep.
Yeah. The nice thing is if people are at the door, we kind of know why.
Yeah.
They're most likely desperate for the gospel, and they're desperate for Christ, and they're
Yeah.
desperate for community in some way, and that's what we offer the best. So
For sure. That's good.
it is.
I don't really have anything else.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We talked fast. Was that long enough, Rich?
Well, I think you can tell we
Okay.
we like talking about these kinds of things. Like we could probably go on for another hour.
Well, we talk about these
pretty
things all the
easily,
time, right? But it's good for some of you maybe that are new to the door, haven't been coming too often, just to get to know kind of what our heart is and the method behind our madness a little bit.
Well, and then we're passionate. We talked
Yeah.
about this in the first one, but that we love the church with all its flaws and all the things that are going on, and we're passionate about.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're passionate about it, and it's neat to talk about these things because it almost reinvigorates that passion.
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely.
Absolutely. Chad, you want to pray us out?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Father, we're thankful for today, and thankful just that you are enough to be the main thing in a church, that we don't have to be flashy, we don't have to be cool, we don't have to be exciting. And so, Father, help us to remember that as time goes on. Help our people to remember that and to know that. And God, we would pray that just as time goes on, that you would help us to be, as Brent said, a church known for one that loves God and that loves the people around them. And that would be the thing that would draw people in. We do pray that you would grow our fellowships, not so that we can say, look at what we've built or look at how big we are, but because Christ is accessible to people in our preaching and in our singing and in our fellowshipping and in the life of the church that happens from Sunday to Sunday. And so, God, we need your help with that, and we ask for it in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for
and
watching.
We'll see you. Well,
Next
men, we'll
week.
see you tonight. Everyone else, we'll see you Sunday.